Welcome to Try Not to Overthink It, where we explore the intricate landscape of mental health, well-being, and everyday life. I'm RJ.
I'm Unique.
And I'm Khalil.
Join us as we dive into insightful conversations, expert perspectives, and personal stories that shed light on the various dimensions of mental wellness. Whether you're seeking guidance, inspiration, or a deeper understanding of the human mind, this podcast is your space to engage, learn, and navigate the journey to a happier, healthier self. So today, we are going to talk about substance abuse. This is a very serious topic because it is something that is on the rise, and we see where a lot of services are not necessarily readily available for those who may be experiencing issues with substances. So we have a guest, Miss Lacricia Coleman. She has been with us before, so she is returning to share her story and her testimony in regards to substance abuse. So, Miss Lacricia, I'm gonna kick it over to you for you to kind of connect with our audience and for us to, partake of your story.
Yes, thank you. And I am honored to be back on this podcast. I think this is the first time with all of the hostesses and hosts, so I'm even more honored to be on the show. I did not go over the questions, as I said before, because I wanted to be as genuine and as relatable to the audience that this is going to reach as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But my story with a substance abuse ended out tragically because it affected my son. My son became addicted to fentanyl and unfortunately lost his life in July of last year to an overdose, which at the time was probably his, if I'm not mistaken, it was his 13th overdose. And the road, now that, you look back at things, you're always hindsighting and what if, should I, could I? And as I look back over the entire road he traveled with that addiction, there was a lot of things that was missed. And what makes it to me ironic is that I'm a licensed therapist. I've been in mental health since, gosh, 2002, worked with several different populations and several different environments and severe mental illness and substance abuse and, thought I knew all the signs. But there were some things, a lot of things that I missed. And hopefully in this interview, what I share in this story can help not only parents, but clinicians who are looking to improve resources or better connect with those who deal with dual diagnoses, because that's what my son did, suffer from both an addiction and a mental health disorder, that it would help save a life.
So, for my first question I have for you is, how did you become aware of your son's struggle with substance abuse, and what emotions did it kind of evoke from you?
Okay, so we, I think, as a society, have this hierarchy about certain drugs and the lack of importance or dangerousness behind use of those certain drugs. So what I mean by that is weed, marijuana. When most kids start to try, get curious about it, it's when they're around their peers and they just trying something. Well, that's kind of how it happened with the start of it, now that I look back with my son. But simultaneously, he was also dealing with some personal home life issues that I didn't realize that his curiosity of use in smoking weed was a self-medicating thing. at the same time, during the time where I know for sure that he was trying, around 15, 16, his father and I were going through separation and then divorce, and my my ex-husband is an only child, so when my son came along, he was like a reincarnation of his father, and then my daughter and their grandmother, they were the only grandchildren to their grandmother. So he lost his grandmother, my son, all around the same time where all of the stuff was happening in the household. So imagine, a kid and his sister looking at all this conflict and looking at all these different changes and looking at people that, very close to, and this idea that they're going to live forever, and everything is being snatched from you, and you don't know how to express, what that's doing to you, especially as a Black male. You know how to show it, but you don't know how to express it. So he started smoking weed. And I remember one time where I was very hands-on mother when they were in school, and I remember getting a call from the high school that he attended, and they said, yeah, Jaylen didn't attend school today. Is he home sick? Because they know to call me if he's not there. I said, no, he's supposed to be there. They said, well, he didn't show up. And I only knew of two places because I tried to always keep up with where they were going, that they would be. So he called himself skipping school, and I found out where he was at, and I rolled up on him, and he was there smoking. And um, I remember him not being apologetic. It was almost like, "Eh, I need this." Um,
Mm.
it wasn't something that I agreed with, and so of course he got disciplined for it. Um, but I knew that wasn't going to be the last time that we ran into that issue, because he wasn't apologetic. It wasn't a I disappointed you, because he was already hurt. He was
Mhm.
already in pain.
Mhm.
So what worse could he do? And so that didn't get bad per se, until, let's see, he did graduate from high school. He went on to college. The 2 years that he attended college, he found him a group of individuals, guys that, felt like he belonged to, because of course we're humans and we are, meant to be just by ourselves. So he was able to
Mhm.
find that group that he felt like he found an identity into. So the weed smoking was probably still going on, I would suspect, but it wasn't interfering or impacting his ability to function at school, his social interactions. But then, after the second year, finances got really, really tight, and unfortunately, myself nor his father was able to contribute to his return to college. So he had to come back home. And with that, because with my son, if he didn't have a direction, or if he didn't have something that was keeping him focused, sports was part of that. His friends was part of that. The interaction between me and his dad was a little strange, so he couldn't really, we weren't really present enough during that time. But it did make a big difference that he could not return back to college. So he returned to environments that created that sense of safety for him when the pain would increase. And so that turned into him getting involved with a group of, well, one particular person, female, that um, led to some legal issues. And I remember going to court with him over this legal issue, and he was drug tested. And the judge, he didn't tell me anything. I didn't know, I thought it was just a weed. I said, "What are you gonna pop positive for?" He said, probably marijuana. But when I was in a courtroom, the judge asked him the same thing, but then he told him marijuana. And I remember the judge looking at me and then looking at him and said, "Well, why is your screen positive for cocaine?"
Mm.
And I looked at him, and I think that was the maybe the first time of him doing any type of drugs that I remember him kind of dropping his head and not really, he knew that I was disappointed, but he wasn't very good with expressing his apologies. But I didn't need him to express his apologies. I needed to know, what do you want to do now? Do you want to change? Do you want to stop? The answer was yes. And so after then, he went he went to work and got started getting back into the swing of things. But that legal issue that was holding over his head was it was a time for him where it was a struggle, because he, for the first time in his life, I think, um felt helpless, that this is something that he and he alone is going to have to deal with, on top of you know the other feelings that he's not addressing. And unfortunately, he didn't stop with the coke with the weed and graduation to the cocaine. He graduated to some other things like ecstasy and meth, and there's a period where your willpower, when you become addicted to substances, you only have just a little bit, and you reach out for that help. And if the person you're reaching out to doesn't hear the way you're asking for help, it can um it can be traumatic. And that's pretty much what happened with my son. The opportunity, or the times where he was reaching out and asking for help in the way that he does it, to the people that he was doing it to, did not hear him. So that's how that happened.
I think, well, one, thank you for just being so open and transparent. This is clearly not something that's easy to talk about, and it's been less than a year. So thank you for even just being willing to share your very personal struggle and your son's struggle with mental illness, with depression, and subsequently substance abuse. I think one of the things that you noted was that there was a comorbidity. A lot of times people see substance abuse as a problem, and I tell people substance abuse is a symptom
Mhm.
of something that's greater, right?
Mhm.
The constant
Mhm.
the constant theme that we've seen over your son's life was this grief that followed him, that he carried like a bag or put on like a coat. And
Mhm.
so the substance abuse became the vehicle in which he was able to experience any type of joy, any type of community. And that became more comfortable than the grief that was weighing him down. As and I'm thinking just a lot of people, I wanted to point that out because a lot of people don't see it as that. They say, well, yeah, he just was using drugs. Like all of us, we have the outlying things of how we navigate through our life's pressures, whether it's trying, working, eating. Those people who never home. Be like, girl, you always outside. Why you never just in the house? Because she may be carrying something that's a bit heavier. And so
Mhm.
while all of us have our way of carrying things, I think it's sad because your family's experience was the loss of a loved one. when that burden did get too heavy, right? When the grief
Mm-hmm.
did take over, and the outlier, which is how he drove his grief around, was substance abuse. And so that was the
Mm-hmm.
thing that people say, well, that killed him. It may have been the grief because he couldn't mask it anymore. And so he kept using to mask something. As
Mm-hmm.
as a mental health provider where you get to see that devastation and pain, how did that affect you? Seeing that you weren't able to step in and be the catalyst for change for your baby, how did that rest with you after he was?
Ooh, great question. I have my own therapist, and I've had my own therapist for a very long time now. If I'm going to work in this
Good.
profession and create spaces where people can heal or start their journey of healing and confront their pain and provide treatment, I need to stand on what I believe in. And part of that was me during the time where my family was breaking apart, was me making sure that my children see how that happens. And so when I noticed my son was having a lot of difficulty with life and things that happen in life, because I think there's a lot of time where there's this idea behind a family and how families operate, and that even if a family breaks apart, that things are still going to be kumbaya. And sometimes a lot of times kids aren't prepared for the tragedies that come with the simple changes of life, like a family you know um, disbanding, or a loved one being lost. Well, with my son, I thought, because I've been in this profession for so long, that I would know the signs. I would know what to look for. I would outwardly know, you know, just come straight out and ask if if he's having any suicidal thoughts. How are you feeling? And, what's going on? But at the same time, I was during that time, and I'm going to come back to your question, Unique, at the time where my family was breaking apart, we were losing loved ones, everything was changing. Um, I wasn't 100% myself. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't present for me. So how could I
Mm-hmm.
be present for my kids if I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know? This is probably right at the cusp of me getting my own therapist. So if you fast forward to, you know, the last, I would say, 5 years of my son's life, and then the day of his passing, I had I there were a lot of triggers of, wow, am I am I good enough? What did I miss? Why? A lot of second guessing, a lot of self doubt,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what if I could have did this? What if I reached out to this person? Because I have a lot of resources, but not one of those resources could make my son want to change or want to get the help to help himself. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to come to accept that there was nothing that I could do. And the space between accepting and still walking that line of throwing lifelines, life jackets, doing whatever, because I'm a mom first. I'm a mother
Mm-hmm.
first.
Mm-hmm.
And doing whatever I can, knowing on the clinical side, he has to want that help. I
Mm-hmm.
can't want it more than him.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
watching him as a mother, and not being able to do anything about it, not being able to give him a resource that could change the direction or the course in which he was headed.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
created, as a clinician, it created in me a lot of, okay, what I thought and what I've read and what I've learned, this is different. Grief is different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had a lot of I had a lot of doubts as a clinician and a mother. I second guessed myself
Mm-hmm.
a lot since then, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning. I'm still learning how to cope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Just hearing you say um the change, the I guess the building of emotions, the roller coaster of emotions,
Mhm.
right? I think that people assume that clinicians do have all of the answer, but you talked about being the mom in the space and the clinician in the space and dealing with your own grief, right? Being able to recognize at some point you weren't able to hold space because you too were experiencing some of the grief that was some of it was secondhand grief for them. And
Mhm.
it's in a lot of ways firsthand grief, but this was your divorce that you
Mhm.
were going through. Yes, it was your children's father, but this was your spouse who were separating from,
Mhm.
your children's father who were uncoupling from, and then to lose a mother-in-law. It was a lot of different factors. So just to even hear you talk about your story from that perspective
Mhm.
helps us to shed some context into the dynamic of what your family was going through and just the trauma and the grief that everybody was going through. So thank
Mhm.
you for that.
Yeah, I want
No
to thank you.
problem. No problem. And I think it's important to understand that, how we relate to the world is usually based on how we was introduced to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my and this is what it wasn't so much as the separation and divorce that kicked in the need for me to start seeing the therapist. It was how I was dealing with various stressors in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and the belief behind how I dealt with those stressors led me to this irrational identity of me being good enough. And where
Mm-hmm.
that came from was my childhood. And so I knew that I was in a space of needing to be in a to make decisions from a healed context. People who make decisions from a hurt place usually regret some of the decisions that they make because it's not really thought through. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was another reason for me knowing that I needed to start getting therapy in lieu of my family breaking apart, because what ended up happening was I started feeling like a failure in several different places, in spite of all the achievements that I've and all the things that I had overcome. I still felt like a failure. And with
Mm-hmm.
what happened with my son, not to make it about me, but it started that those feelings started to
Mm-hmm.
resurface.
Mm-hmm. Triggered them all over again.
Yes.
I think, Khalil, I know you wanted to go somewhere with this, but I think that that's something even point out. Sometimes people say, well, I've been in therapy, I've done the work, so I'm never going to feel those feelings again. But just to hear that transparency to say that theme that you noted that started in childhood and then came at those pivotal points in your life, it was something that requires continual work, continual pouring into to say, hear these feelings again. How do I combat them with the tools that I learned from therapy? How do I realign or reframe my thinking to be more factual or truthful about my present self? And I think that's important
Mm-hmm.
that even when you're in a healed space, you still have to do the work.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Lucretia, what I was going to say is I'm just very grateful that you're here and you're being vulnerable
and you're actually able to help some other people probably get through that type of grief. A lot of the things that we're doing here, people don't get to just talk about, especially when it comes to losing a child, a loved one. It's a very difficult topic. So I appreciate you doing that and helping, because I know by this you're helping somebody else get through that space. What I wanted to talk about is because hearing everything, and Unique alluded to, being a mental health professional and having to actually say to yourself, this right here, what I'm going through is overwhelming. How am I going to deal with that? Having a child that's suffering, and I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know how to help, but the person has to want to help. I'm very appreciative of you saying that, because I work in the mental health field and I talk to parents. I work in substance abuse. I sit here and I try to explain that, but it's so difficult to get a parent to understand that, you know, no matter how much you love your child, they have to want to stay sober. They have to want to change. And I think that is the most difficult thing for anybody to go through. That feeling of helplessness. And you speaking to that today, I'm very, very thankful that you're willing to be vulnerable and open and being honest, because I think a lot of people feel like that, especially when I, like I said, when I talk to people's parents. That's what I get. There's just overwhelming feeling of hopelessness. And I want people to know that unless you go get help yourself, it's going to be very difficult to get through something like that.
It is. It is. And another aspect of, grief, of course, you all know, is the guilt. And I can remember even prior to maybe the second or third overdose, where I was feeling guilty that I threw up my hands and I said, I can't do this. If you don't want it, I'm not going to do it. And him ending back up in the hospital again. And I felt that I could have prevented it that time. So many times that I felt that I could have prevented certain things. And then there were other times where I felt guilty because I just I wanted to have some type of life. And if I did do any type of living, whereas whether it be, taking a trip with my girlfriends or taking myself out to eat or whatever case may be, I felt guilty for living while my son was struggling. And that guilt stayed. It felt as though I was being pulled apart. And I was trying to find a balance where the space of you aren't in control of his actions and his decisions, but what you do in order to take care of yourself may change your actions and your decisions. So it was difficult a lot of the times to lay my head down at night while hearing sirens going past my house and not jump out of my sleep and go try to find it, or look at the news, breaking news or Crime Stoppers or all the things that would scare a parent into probably never sleeping again. Those are the things that I struggled with often. I was constantly anxious. My mind was constantly racing. And so understanding that it being the parent or caregiver, whatever your role is in someone who deals with substance abuse, it's not easy. It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination to quiet or figure out what beliefs are rational or irrational, because fears are real. There are things that are scary out there, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I always thought for some, I always thought the worst. I always thought complete catastrophic,
Mhm.
which is what tore me apart with the guilt. How do you go out and laugh and have fun with your friends knowing this is what your son's life is looking like? How do you do that as a mother?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it was oftentimes very, very hard to be in both worlds and even go into a session, compartmentalize all my feelings and emotions, all the thoughts, all the irrational beliefs, and be present with my clients.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
I think, I mean, I come from a substance abuse background, and so these are some of the conversations I would have to have with parents who their loved one would come into treatment and they're talking about the fragility of living life while they know that their loved one is hurting. And unfortunately, I've been on the other side of those calls, making calls to parents because their loved one has expired or they've lost a life to substance abuse. And it's tough, right? It's tough to encourage the parent or to tell them the grief, right? Yes, it has taken hold, but your loved one, they were fighting. But
mhm,
with any other health challenge, they sometimes lose the fight. And you have to continue. You have to go on. It's tough. It's tough. That's why I'm very cautious of how I talk about substance abuse as being something where it is a disease. It's not something that should be looked at as anything but that, right? Just like any other disorder, we know that all are not life threatening.
Exactly.
Some disorders may be, we have walking disorders, and then we have others that are life threatening disorders. Substance abuse happens to be that for most people,
mhm,
life threatening,
mhm,
right? Because of what it's attached to in the mental space.
mhm,
Um, I think one of the things you were talking about that really just stuck out to me was the constant angst that came with having a loved one who was suffering from grief, depression, and substance abuse, right? That I don't think a lot of us are privy to see unless you work in this field. Several of us on here, even all of us, have probably worked in that field just given the populations that we work with. We see this is our norm,
Mm-hmm.
but the average person, this is not their norm. They don't get to see the mother who can't go out to party with friends just for dinner,
mhm,
or who doesn't want to take the family vacation, or who's afraid to get the late night call because of that.
Yeah.
And so they think that substance abusers are selfish in that way. Well, you know that this is hurting your family, but they don't, right? And we hear that in just your story where your son didn't necessarily know that you were staying up at midnight watching the news and praying that it wasn't him. He didn't know that
Mm-hmm.
you were in your car at wee hours of the morning searching for him because you had an intuition moment, um, because he was sick, right? But the motherly part of you, not the therapist part of you, the motherly part of you was still holding space for your baby that you once carried inside of you, that you watched for, that you dropped off at school. And there was a time in your life where now you're not able to be the mother that you had always been for him because he was an adult,
mhm,
right? Just a beautiful exchange. We in one of our episodes we talked about emotional intelligence, and so that emotional intelligence said, I need to be for my son what he can't recognize that he needs right now. But it's tough because he's an adult and he assumes I have it, and it's I don't need it, and you're like, but you do, and I don't know how to give it to you in a way that you're going to take it,
Right.
yeah,
right? So on the mental health side, and I think when Roger wanted to bring the story to us, he and I had a long fussing conversation, not to each other, but just fussing about the system in which we work. I said, well, Roger Mel, if he had so many close calls with life, because we understand what an overdose is, I said he had so many close calls with life, how come no one admitted him as unstable for mentally. He's like, you know why.
Right.
As a parent, was there some sort of just disappointment in our system? Like, just as the transparent moment, you work in the system too, so I'm not asking you to speak of a system that you're not a part of, but was there some anger towards our system?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, being that I'd worked in substance abuse, and I'm not certified, but I understand the addicted mind, in combination, of, a mental health disorder. What I understood was some of the policies that are still set today, wouldn't allow me to go but only so far with forcing help for him, because policy says that someone who overdoses, that's something that they're choosing to do. In the mental health world, if you take a bottle of pills, then you're automatically, you're automatically able to do your family can put you in a facility on an involuntary basis because
Mhm.
you took a bottle of pills, which means that you tried to kill yourself, right?
Mhm.
However, if someone who's addicted to a substance who takes their free will, overdoses on more than one occasion, you telling me that that's not the same attempt to take your life?
Mhm.
You're saying you're not. Like someone who takes a bottle of pill just says, I just wanted to sleep. Well,
Mhm.
someone who's dealing with substances normally are just trying to
I don't want to hurt
numb
anymore.
they're trying to numb the pain. They're not trying to kill themselves. I read somewhere where with suicide, it's not the intent for the person to kill themselves necessarily, but to get rid of the pain.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
And that's
yeah,
where,
I was going to
go
say,
ahead.
and the I don't want to say the side effect, but the outcome is usually, unfortunately, suicide, and it's
Mhm.
not what was intended.
Mhm.
So when, to your point, and I'll let you ask your question. So I did a couple of times try to have him committed twice. Um, the first time I was told, well, it's a substance issue, and the only thing we can do is send him to a a rehab facility. Okay, well, rehab facilities take money. At the
Mhm.
time, he did not have um, any insurance, because at the age of not even 26, it's 25 and a half, they kick you off your parents'
Yeah.
insurance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the going rate for drug rehab facilities are these days, but what they were asking me to pay, yeah, I didn't have that.
Mhm.
So they did something where they had this, maybe a payment plan or indigenous something or another to try to get him in there. And he was able to stay the first time for like 60 days. Um, well, that didn't work because we didn't have a discharge plan. We didn't have a
Mhm.
solid discharge plan.
Mhm.
And so he relapsed, of course. That's something that
Because
added
life
to my,
happens.
yeah,
Right.
life happens. So he relapsed again. And we tried that this last time we tried to get him committed with understanding that it's not just a substance. The substance is what he's using to deal with the mental health issue. And he
Mhm.
had
Mm-hmm.
documented history of being treated for that mental health issue. So why are we looking at the substance abuse and not treating the mental health issue? So we were able to keep him in there for an extended period of time. And I had a little bit of hope that maybe the judge and the basically the judge and the psychiatrist at that time was going to see it from a different point of view. However, the judge the psychiatrist, his guardian ad litem, the attorney, and the mental health liaison all agreed that he should not be released because they knew that he was going to overdose again. And that was the very last time that I saw my son alive.
So, I mean, I don't know if anybody listens to NPR who listens to this, but if you do listen to NPR, these are the stories that you get to hear of parents. And not to make this an episode about something else, when we talk about voting and lawmaking, this is why this is important, because families are being devastated
Absolutely.
because we don't have laws that protect someone from harming themselves. He was clearly crying out for help, not just from his mom, right, who was doing everything that was in her power. He was crying out from our legal system. See me, hear me, from our medical system. Understand that I need
Help
help.
me.
Help me, right? I don't know how to do it. What I'm going to do to help myself is going to kill me, right? He showed us that many times. And so this is why it's important for us to advocate for systems that are going to go beyond the TV version of mental health disorder, right?
Or just the bare minimum.
The bare minimum. We need to hear stories like Miss Coleman's and Miss Coleman's son, who says, if this is how I'm showing you I need help, hear me out. And just because it makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean my story doesn't need to get heard, right? This is why it's important to show up. We have conversations on try not to overthink it, about seeing people, seeing beneath the surface layer, right? Going up a level with people, where if it was the friend who noticed her son, give me your son's name one more time, Lacricia.
Jaylen.
Jaylen. If there was a friend that said, Jaylen, something not right, man. What's up? I just want to have that conversation with you. I got a group down at the mental health center where I just like for you to come and sit with me. I don't even want you to go for you. I just want you to come as my guest. We get to bring somebody. I want you to come and sit and hear what they're talking about, or use those tools to reach out to him, so that Lacricia could end up having the conversations, and that they could stick when it was time to talk to the judge, by saying these are the facts. But it starts with us. It starts with able-bodied voters who are able to advocate for those change, so that loved ones aren't hurt at the back end. Substance abuse is not a choice. Each of us will tell you, Lacricia will tell you, from a personal and a professional level, nobody wakes up and says,
Right.
I don't want to live today. This is how I want to go. Even addicts, long-time addicts, have told me, Unique, I didn't wake up wanting to be addicted to anything. Life happened, and this was my lot on it. You point any substance abuser, anyone who suffers with addiction, and I'll point a painful past.
Lacricia, I wanted to ask her about that discharge plan, because we are speaking about mental health. We are speaking about advocating for better resources, especially in Alabama. I don't even want to go into that, but you were talking about the discharge plan. Can you kind of just touch a little bit on that? What type of resources were they able to give your son? Because obviously they weren't, set up the right way, obviously. So what were they trying to do?
So at the time where it was time for him to discharge, his forgot what his discharge planner called me, and she said, well, Ms. Coleman, he doesn't have a plan of how does he doesn't have a plan of action for when he's discharged. I said, yes, that's what you're there for. I said,
Right.
he's not privy to the steps that it takes in order for him to get where he wants to go.
If he knew the
And,
steps, he wouldn't have been there.
right.
Right.
And so she said, well, unless he wants to, I can't just let him go with no direction. I said, well, have you given him any choices? Have you talked to him about the resources that are available? I said, me personally, as his mother, don't think he needs to, I don't think he was ready to be discharged. And I told her that. I said, I personally, professionally, would encourage him to go into some halfway house
Silver
where,
living. Right.
just so that he can get, a routine going, a healthier routine in a more controlled environment.
Structured
Yes.
environment.
And so she said, well, none of the places that we have like that have, beds, or you have to get on a waiting list.
Mm.
Right.
I said, well, how long is the waiting list? She said, it can be anywhere from a year to 2 years.
Right.
I
Good Lord.
said, so what is he supposed to do after that? I mean, what is he supposed to do until then? She said,
Right.
well, if you can get him and bring him home and take him to a outpatient, facility, and, make sure he can stay on the list until blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay. I don't know anyone that's ever really dealt with an addict. There are
Right.
some very unpredictable times.
Right.
Sometimes those times can be extremely violent, very aggressive, very scary. And that's what we were, where I was not sure about him being under this roof. And I was more concerned about my safety and his safety under this roof again.
Mhm.
So I asked
Mhm.
her, is there not a way to fast track him getting into one of these inpatient halfway house facilities? And she told me, well, there's really not a way to fast track it, but if he were to do a ASAM, am I saying that right? The
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The
Mhm.
ASAM.
ASAM
Mhm.
assessment.
ASAM.
Mhm.
get someone to do the ASAM, and there's a level, like a
Mm-hmm.
severe, moderate,
Mhm.
The
blah
level
blah
of points
blah.
of care. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they see that he's severe enough, maybe they can get him in sooner. He's at a drug rehab facility.
Right.
You all haven't given him that ASAM yet?
Right. Right. Right.
Right.
He's
Most.
been there at this point for 2 months. You all haven't done that yet? So the discharge planning kind of fell by the wayside because they felt like there was nothing that they could do. Because they felt like he was the one that was supposed to plan his next steps, coming off of
Mhm.
making
Mind altering substances.
Right.
that.
You want someone to make changes to make a decision that's going to alter their life for the rest of their life after my cognition has been compromised.
That part I didn't understand.
And
So, and
and
that part fell by the wayside. And then the second one was, okay, we'll take him to an outpatient, and we'll keep him on the list, even if he's severe. It may not be that long. Blah 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 blah. I'm still working. I can't stay up under this house, and babysit my son to make sure he's not bringing any drugs, or he's not going out seeking drugs. I can't do that. I can't afford that. So,
Right.
do we have anything else?
You're not set up in a place where you can provide the skill building because you're out working, building skills in someone else.
Exactly.
Because he was supposed to be
yeah,
in an environment where they were supposed to be doing the skill building to provide him with the necessary tools to rehabilitate back in his surroundings. I think when
Exactly.
people think about drug
and
treatment,
not and not and not relapse. I mean that's where for me as a provider, where and I just had this conversation with the psychiatrist I work with, is that's where for me as a provider I become hopeless in the medical in the medical field, right? Because this is a human being. This is somebody's family. Even if it's not my family, this is somebody's family.
Somebody's family.
And there are so many hoops, so many hurdles that we have to clear in order to get someone the care that they so desperately need. And then when you couple, because like for me, I work with the clientele who are severely mentally ill. The people that even at their baseline, they're still unwell. Sorry about that. That are still unwell. And you have that hurdle. Then you add the additional stressor of substance abuse on top of that. What ends up happening is this person will come and you will attempt to try to get them a service that they need. Not a service that they electively want, but they need. There's a difference between a need and a want. You need this meaning that you will not survive if you do not get it. I need air. If I don't have air, I die. I need water. If I don't have it, I die. I need food. If I don't have it, I die. So a person needs something. And we have dehumanized, things such as substance abuse to the point to where we don't see the much bigger issue, as you guys alluded to, of what the person is dealing with, what they're struggling through, what they're trying to survive by, trying to cope by misusing a substance. What we stop at is the fact that we look at it as they're an addict. And we only see them as the addict. We don't see them as the person anymore. We stop seeing them as somebody's son, somebody's, brother, somebody's, father, somebody's mom, somebody's dad. We just see them as the addict. And we stop at seeing them as the addict. And so because we stop at seeing them as the addict, we look at it as their problem, not mine. And for me as a provider, I ain't built like that. Like that, that bothers me every single time where a person will go underserved and underprovided for because we stop looking at it from the standpoint of this was my family, or if this was somebody I knew or somebody that was attached or associated to me, I'd want better for them than this. And I mean, to see and to hear people go through this, and especially, like where not only he was saying, hey, I need help, but then you as his mother said, hey, I need help. Help me, help him. Because at this point, when he's going through it, he's not able to physically tell you, hey, I need help. So that is where you as his mother, as a person that is a therapist, as a mental health provider, as, a member of the community, are reaching out and advocating on his behalf. And to roadblock after roadblock after roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, it does become a situation where it just wears you down at that point. Because you're like, I've done everything I can do. What else can I do? And to not necessarily have that lifeline to be able to get your son that help. And I mean, that's where, like, when you and I were discussing it before, I was telling you, like, never stop fighting that fight. Because the fight is only lost when you stop fighting. Because you may not have been able to save your son, but you'll be able to save somebody's son. You'll be able to save somebody's daughter, somebody's mom, somebody. You'll be able to save somebody through you not stopping the fight. Because like Unique was saying, this is why it's important that we show up. When it comes to voting, however you vote, this is why it's important to vote. Because at the end of the day, this is a huge problem. This is not something that, that's going somewhere. Right. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. And I mean, like, me and Dr. Yedler were having this conversation. We were talking about it because we have a client that, no matter what they do, this is just a recurring thing. And like I told her, I said, listen, it's getting cold outside. My man likes to wander. And he's not doing, like pity pat drugs. He's doing hardcore drugs. I can see this ending badly, very badly for him. Like, we have to keep trying, because it was just like, she was getting to the point where she was like, we keep trying to get him the help, and they keep dropping his commitments. You don't quit. You don't stop. You keep doing it. You keep doing it. And that's where, again, of course, the documentation has to come in, because you have to paint that narrative. You have to show the need. Because in healthcare, if you didn't document, it didn't happen. That's why it's important that no matter how inconvenient it is, no matter if you feel like it, no matter if you want to, it's important for us as providers, and I have this conversation with my coworkers all the time. We qualify a person for a service or we disqualify them for a service by
Our
by the
documentation.
power of
Yeah.
our pen.
By
Our
our record
documentation
keeping.
gets people in and gets people out of there. And so that's why it's important that we do the things that we're supposed to do, but also it paints that narrative and it shows why a person needs a service.
Mhm.
It shows why, why the person needs the service in order to make it to see another day. But we also, as providers, have to care enough about not only ourselves, but also our community enough to where when we see a Miss Coleman come in with her son and who is saying and advocating on behalf of her son, we have to care enough that we are willing to advocate on his behalf as well, just like he was our son, just like he was our brother, just like he was our cousin. And for some of us, like, that's where for me as a provider, that type of stuff bothers me. It bothers me because, at the end of the day, like, to hear and to even see it firsthand, people need the help and then they go under service, they go under provided for. Like, that just kind of it grinds my
Well, I think,
gears.
one of the things I've had, Lacricia, no disrespect to Jaylen, but I've had Jaylen on my case and I've looked them in the face and said, is this how you want to die? And I've had to have those hard conversations with hospitals. Oh, we're going to discharge this client with X amount of opiates. We're going to discharge this client with this. I said, not this client. Well, no, they're
Absolutely.
in pain.
That's what I say too.
You better give them some 800 ibuprofen, some Flexerils. You won't give this one drugs. Do you know what this client's history is? Oh, well, we just thought not this one.
Right.
But so, and I know we probably have people, if you're not a mental health professional, but I think we do have some mental health professionals. We take this oath. When I graduated, I take this oath very seriously. The first one is first, do no harm. I've lost sleep over clients. They have haunted my dreams to the point where my husband says, you were talking in your sleep about these people. Because it is a life.
Yep.
It is that important. I will lose my license over advocating for the life of a human being because it is just that important. It's not just an addict. I'm very cautious about how I use the term addict. No, someone who's battling substance abuse, right? Who's battling that. Everybody has an addiction. I don't care what you do in life. Everybody's addicted to something. Even if it's to getting you an extra sleep, hitting that alarm button, keep turning your alarm. You're addicted to not getting up in the morning because you silence your alarm.
Well, that's the part that I hate, is that they have a stigma on people who are suffering from a biopsychosocial chemical disease. This affects you mentally, physically, spiritually. Like you were saying, Lacricia, earlier, it controls you. You can't make decisions. If you're on opiates or any substance, eventually, because it's a progressive illness, it's a disease, eventually that substance is in control of you. You need it.
Alters the brain's cognition.
You need it. Yeah, your brain, and the reward system is set up as, so I need to get this, else I won't be able to survive. And to me, when you were talking about working with somebody who can't even set up a discharge plan, time is of the essence. When I work with patients, I know if I let you go for 2-3 days, because you ain't gonna survive in your parents' house, because the conflicts start, the arguments start. I'm restless, I'm irritable, I'm discontent. I'm gonna be out that door in a minute because I want to get high. I already know what it is. You get what I'm saying? So for someone not to understand that, who works in the mental health center, it's what Unique is talking about. You should be losing sleep if I have a patient and I haven't set them up with a good discharge. If I don't understand what's going to happen to them, because I know they're a person and this family is going to be affected by what I'm doing. And they should have some sort of guilt for that. And it hurts me to hear that someone didn't care enough and didn't understand that time was of the essence when it comes to substance abuse.
Yeah.
I think Lacricia wanted to say something else.
I was going to say that, after that debacle of discharge planning, and he had been clean enough to come home, but with very cautious rules that we were going by. He got back into the swing of working. He knew what were some of his triggers. He told me, Mom, I can't be bored. I need something to do. Um, so he wanted to go back and play football, but, he also wanted to just get back into a space where he didn't feel ashamed about what he had been through or what he was struggling with. So he kept to himself a lot. And the things that he once enjoyed, of course, someone who deals with, mood disorder, um, often, if it's depression, they don't do the things that they normally enjoy. And sports was one of those things that my son enjoyed beyond anything. He can spend hours and hours in doing that, but in his journey, in how his personality and things started to change for him, he developed he was ashamed, and so he didn't get it. He didn't do all of those things. So when he came home, he got back into working. He went to work at this laundry place. Forgot the name of it, but um, a couple of weeks had went by after he started working. And I remember getting a phone call. He was doing really good. I remember getting a phone call from him and he was crying. And I said, "What's wrong? What's happening?" Because I knew he was at work. I took him. And I said, "What's wrong? What's happening?" He said, "Mama, I don't know." He said, "But I feel like there is this darkness that's after me and I can't escape it."
Mm.
And I said, what is it about the darkness that you're fearing? He said that I'll never be able to turn around and go the other way.
Mm.
I didn't know at the time that that was him saying that I'm about to relapse. I don't know
Mhm.
at what point he did, but he knew it was coming.
Mhm.
And I would say probably a week or two after that, he did relapse. He relapsed and it was bad. And it came from um, a fight that he had with a longtime friend of his, who he considered as a best friend. And so, remember, I said that pain was part of my journey that created the space where I couldn't even be there for myself because I didn't know how to deal with the pain that I had experienced. Well, his pain also manifested itself in ways that he didn't know how to cope with when it
It
came
was a
to things.
trigger for him.
Yes, when it came to things such as letting people down. You know, Mom, I'm a recovering people pleaser. I love the word no now, but my son, um, he didn't know, he didn't like letting people down. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He didn't want to be the cause of anyone's pain. And the fight that he had with this guy that he assumed had been his longtime best friend was based off, for him, something that they could have easily just spoke about and it would have been okay, but it became it got physically violent to the point where, my from what I was told, the guy's mother was there in during that time, said that my son didn't even fight back. He said, "I don't
Mm.
fight you. I don't want to fight." He was tired of fighting. All he's
Mm.
been doing is trying to fight against something. Fight against the pain, fight against the rejection, fight against the hurt, fight against the losses that he's had. He was tired of fighting. And so that fight triggered another relapse.
Mhm.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
he never recovered from that. It kept
Mhm.
happening. I could almost time it when it was going to happen, to the point where when he was placed in jail, um, a, almost a year, no, 6 months prior to his death. 6 to 8 months prior to his death. And I left him in there because
Mhm.
the choice for me was, he's going to keep overdosing in something, and I'm going to have to bury my child.
Mhm.
Or I can take my chances in jail, and at least he's got a place to sleep and he's getting something to eat. I don't know what
Mhm.
else is happening. I'm not even going to think that far, but I know
Mhm.
where he's at.
Mhm.
So I left him in jail. I left him there because I felt that was the safest place, and that's the only place that would give him some sort of something, something that I could sleep at night on, right? They let him go. They let him go on something called his own recognizant because he wasn't a level something offender and he wasn't violent and all these things.
Yeah.
All these things. So when you ask about, you know, whether or not I have some animosity towards laws that are in place and lack thereof resources that are available for people who are struggling with addiction, to be perfectly honest, yes, because there
Yeah.
needs to be a total revamp. Being that fentanyl is, if not number one, the second cause of death of the age group that my son died.
Mhm.
I I think just another factor that I'm hearing is Jaylen's death, like his last overdose. Yes, he physically died, but you've been losing your son since that very first time. And each time a part of you died, I had to go and see your baby like that. And so just hitting the point home of there has to be something in place, right? And a lot of it starts with just us as a community being able to band together and say, "You not going out like that. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, no. Come on over here. If you got to come to my house every day and walk my dog, I got two lazy dogs who probably would just be like, "Oh, we walking again? Yep. Jaylen needs to walk you. Jaylen, can you please come and walk these dogs? They're gonna fight you. They're gonna be growling the whole way, but just walk them anyway." Right. That's the kind of community that we talk about here on Try Not to Overthink It. In going beyond the letter
Mm-hmm.
of, well, I don't have a degree. You don't need a degree to be a good human. You don't
Right.
need a degree to get to know somebody to be like, oh, young man, could you come chop this wood for me? Baby, look, well, me such and so you got a wood chop. I know, baby, but I just want to make sure I got enough for my fire next one. Next one. Yeah, because I don't want to go out. But that's the kind of thing where, or somebody say, what's your son? Just to give an outlet for Lacricia to talk about. Well, where's Jaylen? Where are you at? And then when Jaylen comes back, man, I ain't seen you. What you do? Got that monkey on my back. Oh yeah, man, I had that too. Just to be able to have that, to release that guilt, that shame.
Right.
And I was dealing with that thing back in my day.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Mm-hmm.
You was dealt with that.
Mm-hmm.
Been incarcerated. My nephew was dealing with that same thing. We working with it with him.
Mm-hmm.
Never gotta feel shame coming around our dinner table talking about that. The
Mm-hmm.
more conversations we have like this,
Mm-hmm.
the more common knowledge it becomes, the more resources become available, the more groups are available, the more laws are put in place because we've had the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why we don't have
Well,
legislation,
not even just that, but you put a face
Right.
to it.
yeah, well, it becomes commonplace.
You put a face to it. Things become real when you like me like and not to downgrade what you're saying. Me and my dad had this conversation because he's into this whole thing about buying animals now,
Hmm.
for food. And so I was like, it becomes a pet when
Right.
you give it
Hmm.
a name. When you give it a name and you associate a name, names have the power of
Mhm.
tying
Hmm.
emotion to things. So like my pet dog, if I give her a name, now we're tied together. Now there's an emotion attached to that animal because
Hmm.
now I have a name to it.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Now there's a face to it. I can't just discard something that has a name and there's a face and there's
Hmm.
emotions attached to it. And so like like you said, we come together as a community and we put names on
Mm-hmm.
things, on these tragic
Hmm.
events that go on. We associate a face with it. That's where it becomes more
Yeah.
real at that point. Now it becomes something that you can't just push into a corner and
Mhm.
just pretend that it doesn't exist or it doesn't
Mhm.
happen to you. Because like for most of us, I think that that's where our thought process is. That ain't happening to me and my people,
Mhm.
so I ain't
Well, people
concerned
just
about it.
people
It's
make
not
it
real for
that
you, but
it's an outlier, right? It wasn't until I got when I worked in residential care, and I'm gonna try not to get emotional. I'll tell you a lot about my favorite client. This is like my son, young man, and his mother called me and said he lost the fight. I was sick. You would have thought my literal son had died, and I had to go to work and see people struggling. The very same day, I had to go back to my office and see people. This was not my loved one. I met him in treatment. I was the supervisor of the mental health clinic. But I had to go back and I had to go to the house that he lived in, and he wasn't there. And it hurt because I said I tried so hard for him to make it. And I said we failed him. I had to go back to work and say we failed him. And I
You know,
vowed no one else.
yeah. You know, earlier you said something about um, grieving before the actual event or before his death. And I've I've come to have a whole new level of respect for grief
Mhm.
because you're right.
mm-hmm.
5 years, 5 years is the course of time from when the addiction struggle started to his death that I grieve.
Mhm.
And I don't feel relief,
Mhm.
but I do feel a torn sense of peace.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
know he's not suffering. I know he doesn't have to fight. But does that mean that I don't miss him? Or does that mean that I don't look back and wonder if I did A, B, C all the way through Z, that if I had done something different, that he would still be here. And it's what grief does to most of us. It creates this false sense of guilt
That bargaining
and
stage.
world of, you need to stay over in this area where you can look back and see all the mistakes and all the things that you missed, prior to the death. Or I can look at it as I can look at those things and see that you can only do so much and take what you learn and help somebody else.
Yep.
Now, do I want to do that every day?
No,
Even as a licensed professional, a lot of my clients these days, their stories are so much like mine that it does become overwhelming that I'm like, uh, God, if you believe in that sort of thing, is this you truly, this is what I'm supposed to be doing? Are you sure? Because right now I'm feeling the way, and I don't know how to be present in this moment without bringing my experience, my personal experience into this space. But sometimes that's what's needed
yeah.
Right.
because they know you understand. They know you
Mhm.
can relate. Maybe not
Mhm.
specifically to the T of their experience, but they know you can relate.
Right.
Well,
So
Lacricia, I
now,
think,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
see, we've been taught. I tell clients all the time, yeah, 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 all that counter transference, believe in it, believe in it. I said, but one thing them textbooks never gonna tell you is lived experience. And baby, I
Yep.
got it. I lived a couple of lives for a couple of people,
Yep.
And if it fits, if I can share something about my story that's going to just give you a little bit more to hang
Yep.
on, use it. So I think the opportunities that God has just allowed you, the pain that God has brought you through, because I don't think that God causes any of us to go through pain. That's not the God that I serve. I don't believe in that. But I
Mhm.
think that God allows us and gives us the tools to make it through
Mhm.
life and the
Mhm.
devastations that beset us. And so God says, now I'm gonna let that thing that was supposed to take you out be the
Mm.
thing that you can use as a stepping stool.
Mhm.
Your
Mhm.
son's death, addiction was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to take you out as a mom. It was supposed to desecrate your family, not just Jaylen. It was supposed to wipe all of y'all out. He said, that's going to be the thing I'm going to use to be the loudest thing that
Mm-hmm.
brings people to God through your life, through your testimony, right?
Mhm.
Your divorce was supposed to be the thing that wrecked
Mm-hmm.
y'all.
Mhm.
And the devil does that. He wants that to be the thing that's going to wipe you out. But God keeps bringing people up. He's going to keep bringing
Mm-hmm.
people to, because Lacricia, I need you to keep talking. I need them to see them tears. I need them to see the rawness that I
Mhm.
brought you through so they can
Mhm.
see, yo, if she could make that,
And
yeah,
feel
if
feel
she
that
could get through
emotion.
that, maybe I can get through this. Oh, this, because my story ain't even that deep.
Right.
My pain ain't even that raw. Like, I don't even have that emotion that she had. So you gotta keep telling your story. When you're in session, cry them tears. Tell them,
Right.
baby, I tell my clients all the time, oh, you don't get the shit. Because I ain't no quitter. And so you want to do this. Oh, you thought you were about to relapse?
Right.
No.
Not
See,
today.
that means I didn't earn my coin. And I don't believe in leaving no money on the table. Baby, you can't quit.
Right.
They say, you think I be having you on my shoulder talking about, oh, baby, we ain't quitting. I say, you dang on right. But that's because I built that rapport
Right.
in the suicide chair. Okay? I looked at that in the face and said, when you ready, big boy, I'm there. We can go today. But until I told that story to my clients, they were like, you're always so happy. But
Mhm.
never, you
Mhm.
suicidal?
Mhm.
No. People say,
Mhm.
Lucretia, you had a son who was addicted to fentanyl.
Mhm.
You had to watch you watch your kids grieve their grand of an only child. You, Lucretia, I would have never. And they say, oh, baby, I could get you this knuckleheaded baby daddy out now. Who's stressed out? Okay? I could get through feeling like I just gotta use again. No, you can. I used to tell clients, oh, you can't use. If you want to die, this not the program to do it in. They said, wait, what? I said, you can relapse. Be, just not in this program.
Mhm.
You can't choose that. I say, you're right, I can't choose it. But I do get to choose if you live here or not. And if you're not serious about living, this not the program for you.
Mhm.
But that's
Right.
the opportunity you have now as a therapist.
Mhm.
Because you have a different authority now to
Mm-hmm.
say,
Mhm.
oh, no, baby, not here. If you don't want to deal with your depression today, this the wrong day to come to therapy.
Yes.
Come on.
Exactly.
Here we
Yep.
gonna be honest. You want to die today? You got to start with that. Lead with that. Because I can
Mm.
do something with that. I can do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know how I feel. Baby, that's wrong therapist. I'm a real therapist. You know what they just tell us? Baby, I ain't the face. I'm not. And when you get in that space, Lucretia, you'll start to see God be able to give you a level of acceptance that this was your grief to bear. This is
Oh
not
yeah.
too much for you.
Mm-hmm.
You gonna start to see that thing take a different shape. I like to call it beauty for ashes. This is not written in any grief thing, but I think like the eighth step is
Right.
beauty.
Look, we're gonna coin that. So if anybody start
Mm-hmm.
using
Listen,
it, we
Right.
know who came
the
up with
eighth
it.
step is beauty, man. And I would tell, because I would have my substance abuse clients, and I was just like, there's beauty that comes in loss because you get the
Yep.
opportunity now to have a life experience.
Mm.
You get to testify
Yeah.
about
You have
something,
testimony
yeah,
now.
that nobody else. I watched my baby suffer. But let's change it from addiction to cancer. If we were talking about Jaylen's fight with cancer, people would have a different. They would, dang it, he
Right.
he battled for 5 years with
Mhm.
cancer.
Mhm.
Dang,
Mhm.
that sucks.
Mhm.
It was a cancer. It was the most aggressive kind of cancer. Drugs are cancerous to the body.
Yeah.
It just wasn't the body fighting against the body.
Yeah.
It was a symptom that was introduced to the body that was fighting against the body.
Mhm.
So now you have an experience to say, I was blessed to have been able to be an advocate for my baby when he wasn't able to. I
Mhm.
kept my baby in treatment. I kept him in places that were going to keep him alive.
Mhm.
You lost the fight though, but I'm telling you now, no more. The beauty is I get to still do the fighting.
Mhm.
I get to be the advocate for people who don't have a mama like Jaylen. You get to be Jaylen's mama to a lot more people. And
Yeah,
that's because you fought for your baby.
Mm-hmm.
and to piggyback off of what you're saying is that I have to wake up every day and choose what
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to believe
Yeah.
about me as a
Mm-hmm.
mother, me as a clinician, my son's life, my my upbringing, and whether or not I'm going to hold on to the things that's going to get me through. My motivation has always been to do better than what I was shown. Then my
Mm-hmm.
children came along, it
Mm-hmm.
became to do better for them.
Mm-hmm.
And now
Mm-hmm.
that I've buried a child, is to show others how to not make the same choices I may have potentially made, or to look at some things that your children may be potentially doing that can prevent you from having the same outcome that I had. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that the God that I serve only wants for me to live life in abundance, and he has a
Mm-hmm.
purpose for everything. I didn't
Everything.
have, and this is the thought process that sometimes I hold on to, and it may be different for everybody, when it comes to grief, but I didn't have to find my child in pieces somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
My child didn't go missing,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't find him again. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't essentially murdered.
Right.
Um, I I was at the bedside when he took his last breath.
Mm.
I had the opportunity to hold him
Mm.
coming in this world when he took his
Mm.
first breath, and leaving out of this world when he took his last.
Wow.
Mm.
And I don't take any of that for granted. There
Yeah.
is a reason, there is a purpose. And no matter if I fear confronting those feelings or not, the story is going to be told
Yeah.
because it's going to help somebody.
It
Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that I'm pretty sure he'd want, because he was that type of child.
Lucretia, just hearing you talk, man, I always say God is like any parent. When you look at your kids, I'm pretty sure you saw things like, oh, that one got my eyes. Yeah, they got their daddy's nose. And I think that God is the same way. If we believe that God the Father is that way, and God says, now, Lucretia, I've given you my eyes, because you
Mm,
were able to look into the eyes of pain and be able to say, I got to do something. That's a gift that your baby gave you. You looked in them eyes from the first time they opened to the last time they closed, and you were able to see, I'm able to see pain in a whole different way. The
mhm,
beauty of it is you're the catalyst for change now,
Right.
because you'll never forget what that look of pain looks like.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never be able to unsee the pain that was in Jaylen's eye, but now you have the power to do something different.
Absolutely.
Right.
You do. That's the
Mm-hmm.
gift. That's the beauty in all of this. Even if you close your eyes, you still can see it. And when you look in your client's eyes, you say, I've seen that look. I see the pain that you don't have the words to talk about. I see the way you wear pain and how you dress it up and you put a smile on it, but I see it. And when you're ready, I'm here.
mhm,
Right.
I'm here,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an advocate for the change that you desperately want but don't know how to ask for. And I
mhm.
hope that the tools I've gained along the way will help you to fight the battle. But if not, I'm here to hold your hand too. Everybody doesn't know how to choose life. And I've accepted that as a substance abuse counselor, that everybody doesn't know how to choose life. And so I have to be there to stand in the gap and say, but even in choosing this, you're still beautiful and your story deserves to be told.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have one more question. If I know we're about to close, I have one more question, Lacricia.
Yeah.
If you could tell us or paint the canvas of Jaylen for us without his fight, what would you want the audience to know about Jaylen?
Oh, Jaylen had a huge heart, and he thought he was God gift to women, but but he had the biggest heart for those who um were what they call the underdogs. He loved to see people win, no matter what position you're in. He was never jealous of anyone's success. He was a cheerleader, a champion for people getting ahead. He cheered on even when he started sports when he was younger. He loved to read, but then we found out that he had a hearing problem. He didn't want anyone to uh, look at that as a crutch. So at some point in his life, when he was in middle school, he took it and destroyed the hearing aid. I was
Oh
mad as I
God.
don't know what, but he did not want anyone to look at him as being different. Um, he didn't want to look at anyone who had a disability as being different. So he treated them as such, as he wanted people to treat him. He loved seeing people win. And that's what I want everybody to know about my son. He loved seeing people smile, he loved seeing people win, and he loved to cheer people on because he he exuded love and happiness and joy. That was the kind of kid he was, and will probably forever continue to be throughout every lifetime he's living right now.
It's good. It's so good.
Thank you
So
so
good.
much, Lacricia. Wonderful.
So we are going to end the episode there. I definitely cannot thank you enough for sharing your story, sharing your experience, and sharing your testimony with us as well as our audience. All three of us, are very appreciative of you taking the time to be able to share this information with us. This is Try Not to Overthink It signing out. I'm RJ.
Khalil.
If you like what you saw, we ask that you like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's Try Not to Overthink It. If you would prefer to listen to us, I don't know why you would, because we are good looking people. So, if you would prefer to listen to us, we can be listened to on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much everywhere you can get your audio files. We can be located. This is us signing out. We'll catch you next time. Peace.